Do you think that that is being checked in the region?
You know, this duplicity is nothing new in diplomacy and political relations. All countries, we all know, they pursue their interest, and main interest is economic, and then other political and geostrategic. So I think we should not complain as far as this thing is concerned. We have to work in spite of that, because it is very well understood that the country, especially the states, the statecraft, it looks after the interest. But one thing is important. In democratic regimes, in democratic environment, the thinking of the people, it does matter. So are working on their minds, are working on in their media, that should keep going with a lot of zeal and enthusiasm, because that works. Because the same people or the representatives of the people, they come to the the ruling class, and then they make their whatever concepts they make, and they act accordingly. But yes, real politics operates. This world is not a level playing field. The countries' relationships are not based on ethics or fair play. We need to understand that, and in spite of that, the diplomacy goes on to make sure that the environment, they become conducive. The people-to-people contact should keep going. We must address the media. We must have our lobbies. That phenomenon must continue, because it does work in the democratic regimes. But at the same time, our expectations must remain within the bounds of real politics, as you said. Yes.
Right. We'll take a break, and after the break, we are going to keep on continue our discussion on the 11 Hindu Pakistanis who moved to India some years back, and under mysterious circumstances, 11 members of Hindu Pakistani community members were found dead in Jodhpur, India. Pakistan has asked India to carry out an interrogation on that and see what happened to those people, Hindus, some of the Hindus who moved to India. Now, this whole facade that India is a place where people can live peacefully, that has been exposed. We'll be continuing our discussion on that. Stay with us.
Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth.
Welcome back. 11 Hindu Pakistanis who moved to India, they were found dead under mysterious circumstances. This very idea that, now these were the people who thought that going to India might help them, would give them more opportunities, but they were found dead under mysterious circumstances, 11 of them of a family. Pakistan has raised up this issue with the Indian authorities. Ambassador Durrani, talking about these people, let's say, who moved to India, or generally people who think that India is a safe place, perhaps for the people who belong to the Hindu community, that too is above. That stands exposed after especially this unfortunate incident. Pakistan has raised up this issue with the Indian authorities, and one of the Indian diplomats was summoned at the Foreign Office. How do you see this development?
What has happened to Pakistani Hindus in India, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised with the plight of low-caste Hindus, which has been taking place in India for centuries, and it is still in vogue. BJP or RSS, they try to project as the champions of Hindu rights, and they have been projecting that. They are still projecting. They have been projecting for cows' rights and in its byproducts, whatever you have. But at the same time, the cheapest commodity, if available, is the low-caste Hindu in India. I started my diplomatic career from India. I was there from 90 to 94, almost 4.5 years. And the cheapest commodity, if you can ever think of, is a human being in India. Casteism is prevalent only in India. I mean, the caste is the castiest society in the whole world. Therefore, at the multilateral forums, whenever the word casteism comes, Indians, they raise their anti and they oppose it. Reason being that elsewhere in the world, this kind of a casteism is not prevalent. There could be xenophobic, or there could be, racism and others. But this kind of within one society is not prevalent. So this is only prevalent in India. So what Pakistani Hindus, they were there almost a decade, and they have been severely subjected to discrimination. I'm not surprised. And I even met during my stint there Hindus who had migrated from Pakistan, from Swat region and other. They would curse their decision going to India. Reason is that they were discriminated. They were taken as Pakistanis. They were not taken as Hindus or something. So we have to be, mindful, and all our citizens should be mindful that where you live, you have more value. There could be sometimes some aberrations, some excesses done by unscrupulous elements, but there the inefficiency of our law machinery should not make an excuse that they have to migrate. This is my message, and this is what I read. Yes, Taimur.
Right. General Modi, this unfortunate event, Pakistani Hindus moved to India, and as I mentioned earlier, they were found dead over there. Pakistan has raised up this issue. This whole case, how do you see it? And do you see this as an expose of the situation that is there in India? And for a lot of people to know that what is going on in India.
Thank you. I think Ambassador Durrani has covered it very well, but earlier we thought that the Muslims of this subcontinent have learned their lesson, that whatever Qaeda-Azam stood for, that was correct, and Muslims, it was the right decision to get a separate homeland for the Muslims. But now I think the Christians have also realized it, and also the Sikhs, but even the low-caste Hindus, Dalits. So it is not just Hindu. It is actually, you also need to qualify that which Hindu, which level, which caste of Hindu you belong to. So I think it also exhibits a lack of trust between the two countries, that anyone, even a pigeon going from Pakistan is labeled as a spy, ISA spy or Pakistani spy. So you can imagine what do they do with the human being, and that is exactly what they have exhibited. So they have a deep-seated mistrust against Pakistan. Even if a cow crosses the border or a pigeon crosses the border, and this time the human beings are there. So whether Hindus or not Hindus, they do not trust anyone coming from Pakistan. That is the state of affairs, and look at them. And I think what Durrani Sahib was saying, that ultimately this points towards a very grave situation as far as India is concerned. I think people would start coalescing, getting together in certain areas, and they might ask for independence, or might for some deregulation or something. So all this is written on the wall. I don't know in which direction India is moving, but we should not interrupt them. Let them move in that direction.
Right, right. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Mr. Speak, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining us, and I thank General Lodi and Abbas Johnny for joining us. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.
The Ubia National Park is located in the lush hills of the Galiat forests that stretch from near Islamabad to Abbottabad and through to Azad Kashmir. It is a sanctuary traditionally known for its spectacular scenery and its unspoiled, peaceful surroundings. But in the last few decades, that has changed. Every year, more than 120,000 tourists visit the park in the summer season. The area has become increasingly popular and is now bustling with traffic and large-scale development. Where there were trees and streams, there are now hotels and shops. The fumes emitted from vehicles affects not only trees and plant life, but also the wild animals that live in the forest. The large number of hotels, summer houses and restaurants brings its own set of problems. The careless disposal of waste by these hotels and restaurants threatens the fragile ecosystem of the park. Garbage and contaminated streams are to be found all along the once pristine trekking routes. This solid waste and contaminated water has become a serious threat to the environment. Much of it is non-biodegradable, and the rest decomposes at a particularly slow rate due to the cold climate. The garbage can harm the animals of the forest too, as they forage for food. Where there were once streams of crystal clear water, there are now rivers of garbage. The polluted water affects communities downstream who have to go further from home every day to find clean water. Waterborne diseases force the local people to spend money on medical care, which they can hardly afford. All this pollution contributes daily to the degradation of the forest, and the Ubia is under threat. Both visitors and local communities need to be aware of the harm the waste and pollution is causing. the lack of proper waste management makes the problems worse. All this waste pollutes the forest and harms animals and humans alike. If we don't change the way we treat the forest, there will soon be no sanctuary left. Nothing for the visitors to enjoy, nor for the mountain communities that have made Ayubia their home for generations.
You are watching PTV World. Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to PTV World. Joining you for the news this hour, I am Ahmed Nawaz. Let's take a look at the headlines. Prime Minister Imran Khan says the government is committed to introduce radical reforms in the power sector to remove hurdles in the uninterrupted supply of power and electricity. Foreign Minister Qureshi says Prime Minister Imran Khan will speak on the Kashmir issue during his address in the upcoming UN General Assembly session. Says there is no precedent of the atrocities that have been committed in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir since 5th of August last year. Prime Minister Imran Khan chairs meeting regarding revival of film industry. He approved certain measures to revive film industry in the meeting. Advisor to the Prime Minister on Finance, Hafiz Sheikh says the government is continuing with reforms in tax system to make it transparent through automation. Kartarpur Corridor website and book on historical Gurudwaras of Pakistan launched in Lahore. The website would give all relevant information about Kartarpur Corridor. 13 more educational institutions, including 10 in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and 3 in Sindh, closed for flouting coronavirus SOPs. Number of confirmed coronavirus cases across the globe now have surpassed 30 million. Meanwhile, more than 940,000 have died due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Pakistan Cricket Board's open trials for selecting 6 under-19 Cricket Association squads are underway in central cities of associations. The headlines for now, but for their details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on Facebook with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Stay tuned.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. Of course, the incident that happened about a week ago on the motorway has jolted us, and certainly we're all still, I think, in shock of what happened and how it happened. And of course, the perpetrators will, we hope, be avenged. Some headway has been made in that case. But what's important is that it leads us to the larger question today. The larger question being, why are we repeatedly having cases like this within our country at this time? Why are we not giving a safe environment to women? The rape culture, the rape apologists also in some cases we saw. We'll be talking about the question that today, are we going to change things? Are we going to change the laws? Are we going to move towards reform that allows people who have repeated offenders to go scot-free, or to again, like I said, repeat offences? We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about our judicial system. We'll be talking about the impact, of course, this has on psychology of the victims, and not only the victims, but their families also. Let's talk about all of that today. I have with me Dr. Aiza Yazdani Abid, who's a psychologist. Thank you for joining us today. Waqas Salim, who's an anthropologist and an analyst. Thank you for being with us today. Fatma Shaheen, who is a lawyer, legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Aiza, let's start off with you. The situation now, of course, we all saw the incident that happened. We're all deeply shocked as a society. And, you know, people have been saying why. There have been people who've actually been questioning the fact that why is this taking so much media space? Why this is not an isolated incident? But the question is that I think it's a good sign that even now, if this one incident has jolted us and has shocked us to that extent that we're talking about it, we're debating about it. I'm sure that you have a lot of, lot more access to victims, a lot more, you probably in your experience have seen people deal with it. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with you 100% that now we are talking about it. And what I'm happy to see is that the focus of the subject has moved from the victim to the offender. You just can't do whatever you want, and that is the message we consistently need to put across. So if you just have a look at the way we have developed a mindset that it is the victim who is supposedly responsible for all of this. So right now we have to move away from that whole narrative of what happened and why it happened, and now divert our energies and our thoughts to people who do these things. The reason why these incidents are happening is because our focus is not correct. We are not able to see what is right and what is wrong. The impact, what I see, it just destroys families. It's not just confined to that person. Because I have studied transgenerational trauma, it is a transgenerational trauma. It will go from the victim to the children, to the husband, to the family, and at one point they won't even know what they're traumatized about, because you're so used to hiding it and not discussing it and not getting. So people will be having PTSD and lots of other issues, but they won't know what they're suffering from. So it invokes a whole system, you see, the legal system, your psychological support system, the prevention system. So everything has to now come into play, otherwise we are going to just keep on continuing.
We'll talk more about that, Dr. Aiza, and also the taboo, of course, associated with not only the crime but also the help that you need, mental help for it. I'm going to go to Waqas ji. Waqas, other than that, we saw a lot of statements coming in, and I'm not just talking about that one statement, but overall, as a culture, we should have taken more care, should have done better, should not have traveled at the time, all of those things. They are also in essence saying that, it's not, the fault is not where it should be. You're at the very least distributing the fault. And that also, I think, gives the victim the idea and goes into the psychosis. I don't know if that's a better word or not, but it goes into their mind at least that they are perhaps to blame, and that also contributes at least to some level to the pain and suffering they're already going through. Isn't that true?
That's true, because you see that the victim has been blamed in first instance by the law enforcement agencies, and one of the very important person who was heading the Lahore police. So, and now that statement has been reversed as well. But this is not something associated to the law enforcement agencies. That is something that relates to the society at large, where you see that this kind of culture is prevalent, and we just try to shame and blame the victim in any case, and especially when it's the women, they belong to the marginalized part of the society. So we just try to blame them for everything. And then the way sexuality is defined, the way sexuality is determined, and within the premises of that sexuality the women is positioned, that is actually problematic. And that actually starts from the early childhood training in our society, and it moves on till the older ages. And as Dr. Sabha was talking about the transgenerational trauma, you see that this kind of socialization travels from one generation to another, and it becomes part and parcel of the society. So in our society we see that the women is something, it's basically the objectification of the women. Women are being treated as an objects of any kind and sort. So that is something very bad, and this is the issue that needs to be addressed at every level.
Right, I will come back to you. I'm going to go to Farzana Bari, who is an activist and also has done a lot of work on this issue. Farzana Sahiba, as far as the issue, we basically want to talk about societal reform. We saw what happened with this one incident again. We saw people saying there were a lot of rape apologists, for the lack of a better word. There was a lot of, at least at the very least, blame attribution, part of it also. Do you think that, what kind of societal reform do we need to go forward for? What do you think? It's of course, education reform is one side of it. But where do you think and how do you think do we start from the society?
Absolutely, we need societal reforms, but societal reforms cannot come by itself, because I think state has a fundamental responsibility to introduce those reforms, because through laws, for example, and also I think we have sufficient, laws in Pakistan, and particularly in this case of rape. I think we have a maximum punishment of death and 25 years imprisonment and all that. But obviously, the one way of the thing is that if you have laws, through that also, because you criminalize certain social behavior, and as far gender-based violence is concerned, I think we do have introduced number of laws. The only problem here is that the state who is responsible and state institutions which are responsible to implement those laws, they are not actually functional. There's a complete dysfunctionality as far as the criminal justice system is concerned. Now, of course, the speedy justice and punishment is one way of also bringing change in social behavior and attitudes. When people know that if they'll commit such heinous crimes, they will be taken to task. But since it's not happening, therefore that kind of criminal mindset is prevalent, and they are attacking the marginalized sections of society, that includes women, trans and other people. So I think in a way this is not a rocket science to say what needs to be done, but I think the issue in Pakistan is that we know what needs to be done. There is a prescription out there, but the thing is that the people, the state, the people who are at the position of power are policymakers who are supposed to introduce those reforms in order to bring change in social attitudes. Because of course, if we have not given education to people, if people are not there is kind of a frustration which in a society generally, and generally I think we have created that kind of environment in which this criminal mindset, that the seeds are there, and so that criminal mindset is very much growing very fast in our society. So I think when we talk about changing the social attitude, it is the responsibility also of the state. Of course, it's the responsibility of the society as well, but who are the people in the society who will bring that kind of a change? Because if you have not educated people, if you have not it's not like everybody in Pakistan, in Pakistan, that the people are violating women's rights and all that. That is a certain section. The majority of people are not like they are. Men are not rapists. The majority of men are not rapists, or majority of them are not attacking women. But this is kind of sections of society which has become very criminal, and to change that, I personally feel there is a huge responsibility on the part of the state and governments, and then obviously in terms of changing attitudes, of course, unless we have this change,
I will come back to you. I'm going to go to now. I'm going to go to Fatma Shaheen. She's a lawyer. Let's hear what she has to say as far as the legal side of things is concerned. Gee, Fatma, you heard. I hope you were following the discussion that we were having as far as the issue of reform is concerned. Certainly, as a society, we need to do a lot of things, and that's what we've been talking. But as far as the law is concerned, rape is, of course, a crime, punishable. And when we talk about legal reform, it's not just about the crime and the fact that it has a punishment. It's also about the fact that there are repeated offenders. There are, unfortunately, we have a system where, we allow people to go scot-free, for the lack of a better word, and then to repeat those crimes. How do we cater to that?
I think that's a very important question, Mahrukh, because I believe you're a lawyer
Fatma,
yourself.
can you hear me?
When we talk about the system, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So because when you talk about the system, my very important concern as a lawyer, as a human rights activist, when I heard of this case was, why was there not prevention? Why was there not detection? Firstly, the police refused to take jurisdiction. They said that, this doesn't fall within our jurisdiction. Then, secondly, there is no register. So many criminal cases I personally also do in Lahore. There is no record of sexual offenders, so to speak. Now, two of these people, one of them was a repeated offender. He had been committing offenses since 2013, so to speak. And he was he was an absconder, and then he had been released on bail. Last, I believe, was on the 18th of August 2020, like 20 days before the incident took place. My question is that why wasn't this person behind the bars? Now, when you talk of the system, a lot of things which the panelists have said, especially Fardana Bari Sahib, I agree with her. But when we talk of reform, what is most important, how I look at it as a lawyer, is firstly reform in the police, so as to sensitize the police, to ask the right questions, to basically conduct the investigation very fairly and without any predetermined mindset, like we saw one of the very senior investigation police officers unfortunately had. And then when the woman goes into trial, when she's actually in that process of seeking justice, the way she is handled by the judiciary, and not only that, by in fact lawyers as well. Once I was doing this case of an acid attack victim who had also been raped, and she said that most of the harassment that she faced was unfortunately in the court. The way she was dealt with, the fact that there were not women judges that she could talk to, the kind of questions that she was asked in the cross-examination. So I think when we talk about reform, a very, very important part of the reform is the criminal justice system. So that is something that we need to focus on. And yes, one more very important thing, the law is very clear that whenever such crimes happen, especially after the 2016 amendments which took in the Pakistani laws, there has to be a female investigating officer present at the moment who is going to basically lodge the FIR, and this has to be done in the presence of a female family member. Now, to my knowledge, no such thing ever emerged. There was no mention of a woman officer lodging this FIR or even being present at the time that this FIR was made. So we need to see a lot of things.
You're saying across the board, of course, the way, like you're saying, the way that the crime is viewed, and then the treatment of it by the officials. Of course, that really matters. By the officials. Because I think, because I think even with this case, there was a stage, if I'm not wrong, where the victim herself, she said, I don't want to participate in, identifying the culprits, because she had lost confidence in the system itself, of course, in the way she was treated, in the way that the statements came out. Of course, we saw a strong reaction from society, but unfortunately, there's also that part of society we can't ignore, that also, are rape apologists. So we need across the board reform. I will come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Aiza. Dr. Aiza, what about, okay, we talk about help, we talk about bringing the offenders to, the culprits within the fold of law, all of that. But what about the victim counseling? The victim counseling and also their family. And also another branch of that, what we're talking about within the criminal justice system, I think they will also probably have to be taught how to deal with victims and the mindset to have when they're dealing with victims. So I think that also is where psychologists will have to come in.
They will have to come in, and I think earlier the word you were looking for was psyche.
Right.
Psychosis, I think, is another word.
Okay.
But when the victim, you see, let's take it from the moment when anything happens, when something happens. So the first response that you give to that person is, it has to be a specific response. It's a crisis response, and the world all over is doing that. Why aren't we doing that?
Exactly.
It is incorporated in your rescue services. It is incorporated in your ambulance, every service. Why have we not? We have just put an ambulance there for emergency, but we haven't trained the first responders. Therefore, it starts from there. It's a psychological first aid, we call it, how you deal with it. It's a very structured response, and that comes first. Then you sensitize the whole department, the police, whether it's a male or a female. Look, we also need to come out of that. I know we are a culture very much defined by the gender, but at the same time, what we also need to come out of is the gender typing, the stereotyping that we're doing. We must have women. Okay, we should have women, but if we don't, why don't we in the meanwhile sensitize the staff to it? We give them rigorous trainings. We expose them, okay, this is what you are not supposed to say.
But Dr. Aiza, when we're talking about sensitizing the staff, certainly that's one thing. But this is an instant where it was highlighted that it's not only, it's at all levels.
Yes.
You are seeing a reaction come out, and I think that, to be fair to the police officer concerned, the comments made in his mind were probably as a, something he said this on record that, he would probably say this to his own sister or his own daughter. That's how he would counsel it. So to change that mindset, to change that thinking and put the blame where it's due, only then they'll be able to deal with victims also.
In their capacity as a professional, they have to respond to a situation. They are not to judge or decide or whatever. So the first response that they have to give has to be a structured, defined response. And that is the role of psychologists or the forensic psychologists, and that is how they merge with the legal setup. And that is how we take it forward, and then every step of the way, then we have the counseling for the victim. And this counseling, the victim can also decide who she is most comfortable with. Some may be comfortable with a male psychologist, some may be comfortable with a female.
Right.
So I would again suggest that we come out of this concept of women for women and men for men. We need to look at a society which is able to take care of each other. We are sensitive to what is right and what is wrong. Only then we can be at
certainly men can be sensitive, probably as sensitive as women can, and they can probably also have that same kind of reaction that women can to women. In some cases people believe that men are perhaps more sensitive to women. But the question, we will come back after a short break, and my question really is, as a society, how do we move forward from here, and what are some of the steps we can take ASAP to change things for the better? Let's not talk about long term, and let's not talk about things that will probably take a lot of time. Let's do that also, but let's move towards short term goals also, which we will see results of. All of that after a short break. welcome back. We'll be talking, we've been talking about how we need to change as a society for things to get better. Unless we do that, I don't think things will change, and unfortunately a month from down the road, perhaps a couple of months, God forbid, we'll be dealing with more incidents like this. I'm going to go to Fatma Shaheen with this. See, Fatma, you know, unfortunately we are, you know, perhaps if I'm not wrong, as the statistics say that, you know, below about 3% as far as, you know, our response to sexual harassment is concerned, and the way we deal with harassment as a society is concerned. Certainly we do need to reform the criminal justice system, there's no doubt about that. But in your experience as a lawyer, in terms of counseling, do you know if there's a provision that you know, the victims have access to counseling, or we have counselors, you know, psychologists to talk to rape victims, to talk to victims of abuse? Is that one of the provisions that's prevalent in the law? Is it being practiced? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that's a very important question again that you've raised, Maro. Recently, like I think 3 years ago actually, I've done several shows myself on this very particular issue. There were domestic violence centers. There was a law that came into place in 2016, pursuant to which violence centers, you know, had been set up, at least to the extent of Punjab, which were providing a one window, basically facility to people who came in with complaints, like where they were getting free legal aid, they were also getting free medical and psychological counseling. Then all over the country, we have women centers established to do that, because whenever a woman goes in to get, you know, free legal aid, be it from the civil society, be it from the government set, you know, pro bono women centers, there is inevitably a psychologist or, you know, counselor there as well to, you know, counsel women, so to speak. But the main problem, coming back to it again and again, is, you know, the law is very clear. I think earlier Fazana Saiba also mentioned this, that the punishment is also very clear, that either there's death penalty or there's an imprisonment of 25 years and or a fine, depending on, you know, the gravity of the offense, depending on whether there was any attempt to murder the victim, or it was just rape, on the kind of injuries that were sustained and all. What is very important is the enforceability. What is very important is how these laws are practically, if at all, you know, enforced. So these are the things that we need to work on. And very frankly speaking, in the last few years, we've had very landmark judgments, in which I remember a very important judgment which came from Justice Asif Saeed Khosa Saab, in which he said that, you know, there is no pardoning for acid attack victims, which is again a very important and a very, you know, despicable form of violence against women. And then recently we have a comment from Justice Qazi Faizuza Saab saying that, you know, there is no honor in honor crimes, because these are all, you know, forms of violence against women. What is more important is, and then also I'm sure a lot of people know, and you would also be knowing because you're a lawyer, that there were these gender-based violence courts which were separate, you know, set up by Justice Khosa Saab, in which he made sure that, you know, people who were victims of violence, and they would be catered to separately, and something that is, you know, along the Western models of justice. But then again, number one, do people know about these changes, positive changes that have been happening? Number two, are they being implemented in letter and spirit? Is the staff state actually that capable? Are they that sensitized? Are they that educated to understand what exactly is happening in the system? Do they have that level of competence to deal with such, you know, survivors? One very important issue that I have, and I think which you also raised, is that of the mindset. Now, when we saw the senior official apologizing on his comments, what I really thought was that, is this an apology in terms of his words, or is this an apology for his mindset? The mindset is something that really needs to change, be it at the level of the law enforcement agencies, be it at the level of the society, and even for that matter, the survivors. Instead of victim shaming them, or, you know, for that matter, making them feel bad about the ordeal that they've been to, we should go out and, you know, help and support them.
Right, definitely. I will come back to you. I'm going to go to Farzana Bariji. Farzana, I think that Fatma raised some very important questions. She's talking about awareness. That is one of the things that I feel is you know, one of the, you know, perhaps it's when issues like this happen, when incidents like this happen, the whole media is talking about them. Of course, there's a lot of you know, other factors associated with it, but awareness is one thing that, you know, perhaps one hopes it will contribute to awareness in society. And when a hue and cry is raised, But then, you know, we saw what happened with the Kasoor incident. Unfortunately, we saw what happened. It was an issue involving children. And then we saw what happened with the Zainab case, all of those issues. Unfortunately, we are here today again talking about those issues. In your experience as a professional in the area, have you seen the police, or have you seen, you know, the kind of help that the victims need? We've been talking about, you know, psychological help. Have you seen that, you know, that they have that kind of access to that kind of help, the victims, when they are, you know, when on the scene or afterwards? Do they get the kind of counseling that they really need at the time?
Yes, I think absolutely not. That's why I think the Fatma has mentioned all that aspects we have to take. Basically, this is a multidimensional issue, and we have to take a holistic approach to that, because I think if you see the kind of, if we have that kind of a framework how to deal with this issue of gender-based violence in the country, I think there are three main aspects we need to look at. One is the preventative, you know, how do we prevent, you know, these kinds of crimes to take place in the society, and that is something which requires a long-term solutions, in the sense that, you know, education, creating awareness, having a national policy, for example, of national level awareness policy, where we keep on repeating that narrative, like CTV, our national channels and media keep on repeating the narrative of gender equality and so on and so forth, to create awareness. So I think there are a lot needs to be done, which is kind of a medium and long-term things. But then we also need to have a protective measures, which is about, like, first of all the legislation, which I said to large extent we do have those legislations, and with that we need a gender sensitized criminal justice system. And you have heard, I think both other people who are sitting or who are talking the program refer to that how our criminal justice system is absolutely not gender sensitized, and people are not getting any justice. I think there is almost less than 3% conviction rate in gender-based violence cases, and 0.5% overall in cases where there is this is the rape cases kind of 3%, and overall gender-based violence I think is less than a 0.5% conviction rate.
But Farzana, where do we go from here? Do you think that this incident will change things at all?
I'm coming towards that. So what I'm saying, then, when we look at the protective measures, that after protective measures we need a support, because these are the crimes which are happening today, and the people need immediate support. So what Fatma is referring to, that for example, if there are going to be, there is for example, in Punjab they said there were one window operation centers will be in every district. But if you ask me, I think I'm only aware the one in Multan, and in nowhere else these systems are in place. Similarly, all Darul Aman, for example, the shelter homes where women supposed to go who are victim of violence, they're supposed to be, there is a position of a counselor, but if you go there, none of these shelters, although there are very few and far less than what is required in Pakistan, but you will see that either those positions are not filled. So I think in practice those services are not available, and similarly, even if it is required that in a police station there has to be a woman, and this Fatma referred to, but I can tell you, when we go to the police, to register FIR along with the victim, I have not seen any police station where there is a woman police officers, come at that time. So I think the major issues are that what needs to be done, but to keep on asking me, I think what we are saying on papers in terms of our policies, in terms of various provincial governments are talking about that we have these certain services available, even the hotlines, you call those hotlines, whether it's the public sector or even in the NGO private sector, you call them, they will never pick up the phone. I think the real issue and challenge is that whatever we are saying we are doing, that is not on ground functioning. that is not operational, that's not functional. So I think we have to deal with this full dysfunctionality of
exactly, like for example, even the emergency number that this lady called in this case particularly was not functional. She was given another number and then an hour and a half. So very true, you're very right that our functions and unfortunately our systems are not functional. That is the issue. And where we do have systems also, like Farzana Saib was saying, where we are supposed to have a psychologist, where we are supposed to have that kind of response, there we don't even have it there. So it's not the law, it's really the implementation, it's really the attitude, it's really the society as a whole. Then we come back to the same thing.
Yeah, I just may add to that, and also adding resources. For example, forensic labs, or for example MLOs. I mean, you need to hire more medical legal officers, women medical legal officers. Also, where the state is, or even the provincial governments are claiming that they are providing the services, they are not actually even putting resources, so there aren't matching resources with that either. So whatever little is there is not functioning, and what needs to be there does not have the resources.
It's not there at all. So unfortunately,
that is another issue.
Right, Aiza, in your opinion, as a psychologist, how do you deal with, where, of course, we need to implement things, where we do have the legal, where we are covered legally, where we are mandated to keep people, then, it's the job of the enforcement agencies to make sure that they're enforced. And there's no doubt about that. But what about attitude again? We change it through the media, we talk about it, we try and communicate to the masses that, this is how you are supposed to. But unfortunately, in schools, in education, what are some of the changes you think we can make for our children to make sure that our girls are safe? And not only girls, across the board, we need to make our boys safe, we need to make our society safe.
Exactly. So it all comes back basically to my being sensible and your being sensible and your being sensible. So how do we end up being sensible? First of all, we are undergoing through a process of developing a single national curriculum. I think if we develop a curriculum which is, let's take computer out of it, and develop a subject on understanding how your body works, and we build up those topics, and we build up a bit about the law and about similar topics, and how then we move away from that rote learning. Then we move away from the gender roles which we are imposing upon, that the mother is cooking and the father is not reading a newspaper now, but now we do, but he's on his mobile. So we move away from this misconception, and we make it okay for people to come up and say what is right and what is wrong. To be able to hear another person say what is wrong, it needs a great strength of character. So basically, attitudes and lives will only change when you create an atmosphere of learning. So start with the syllabus, you have professionals all across, and then what I have seen over time is the reduction of social scientists in the field. So right now we are hell-bent on a self-destruction, and the point is, if you see the cases, and I think it's a very good research topic, see where they are emanating from, the kind of geographical areas and how the radius is spreading. That is a very important thing for us to understand. We need to understand how our society is changing. Then at the second level, like I said, let's take it away from being a gender and let's focus on being good human beings. This thing will come across every level. One thing which I wanted to suggest when you mentioned repeated offenders, remember there was a time when they would take on this bracelet or this tracking device. It's very important. People who are now traveling abroad for COVID, they are being put on this device so that they stay in the hotel rooms. Okay, so why can't we do this? Develop a system where if there's a person who we suspect, we put a tracker. It is very important. Again, like I said, the mindset from victim to identifying the criminal. Identify the crime, identify the criminal, not the victim. Right, so the process has to shift to there, and then therefore your tracking systems will come in place for the offenders.
Right, Vikas, can you please add to what you think we can do? Because Dr. Aiza is very right. She's saying that we need to shift to the offender. And unfortunately we are a culture, we are a society where it's the person who's a victim who has to prove, who's interrogated, who's put on trial, from the point where the accusation is made, where the incident takes place, to the whole tiers of our legal system, and that is not a very happy picture for whoever is pointing it out.
As you see our society today, you have to adopt a multi-pronged approach. A unilateral approach will not work. At the moment, you have to start with the syllabus. You have to make sexuality, sex education part of the curriculum, part of the syllabus. You have to make human biology part of the syllabus, and you have to clearly tell the children that the issues which relates to human biology plus sexuality. Furthermore, you have to have the implementation of law, because we have laws but these are not properly implemented. Plus we should sensitize people through media. We need to circumvent our jokes. We need to at the moment change this culture from different angles and different perspectives. By doing so, we will be able to make a comprehensive change. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. I mean, you can look at where your highest forums and the kind of remarks being made against women or at times against men, and then you have to take all the stakeholders along. I mean, if you're talking about gender sensitization, you cannot miss the women. I mean, it's not only that women are being harassed and bullied by men, they are being the same is being done by the women as well. So you need to sensitize them as well, because within your household you have certain relations who pressurize women. Even mothers educate and socialize their daughters to hide things, and they just tell them that you're not supposed to disclose this act in front of your father or your family members. So you have to have a multi-pronged strategy in a society where family structure, state, law, everything has to come into effect simultaneously. Then we can move on. Otherwise, a reductionist approach at this point will not work. You have to have a holistic approach where all the factions and sections of the society moved and sensitized together.
Right, I'm going to go to Fatma. Fatma, in terms of the law, certainly you did point out that we have laws, we don't have a dearth of laws, but unfortunately we lack in implementation, and that is a concern across the board. And where we have systems, those systems don't work. Identifying that problem, do you think that in terms of reform, let's talk a little bit more about the areas that you think need reform within our criminal justice system to make it a more friendly system for the victim of such crimes?
I think, Mahrukh, to start with, like I earlier saying, in continuation to that, it has to be more women-centric, be it at the level of women prosecution, be it at the level of, going and reporting the crime to the police, be it at the level of judiciary, or for that matter, even because I, as a women lawyer, see that as a very pressing problem. Then, what is also very important is that there should be certainty of punishment. Now, of late, we've also been hearing, there's been a lot of debate about public hanging and chemical castration, and all that needs to be done in order to stop those crimes. But what is more important to understand is the fact that there needs to be a certainty of punishment, whether it is giving the victim, whether it is giving the convict life imprisonment, or for that matter any other penalty. The problem with the system now is that there is no certainty. If somebody is committing any crime against a woman, be it rape, be it honor killing, be it an acid attack, or any other crime for that matter, there has to be something, the person who's committing the crime needs to know that, this is exactly what I'm going to get myself into. That discretionary element when it comes to practically handing down sentences, in my opinion as a lawyer, that needs to be done away with. Personally,
and that of course has to do with the confidence within our own justice system, because there's unfortunately we don't have confidence in our legal system.
Again and again they are saying that this is an argument which a lot of people are saying that they should be publicly hanged. As a human rights activist, I as a lawyer, although I really condemn it, any form of violence, be it small or be it, of a large scale against a woman. But I feel that death penalty is not the way forward. You need to reform the offender. You need to make that person realize at a very basic level what they've done is wrong. You need to, of course, punish them through a fair trial, following the due course of law as it is. But just hanging people around and making it, public is not the way forward. Perhaps I think chemical castration would be a better alternative, something which is being, put forward again and again by the government as well.
In terms of the deterrence effect, we are very often compared, our system and our failings are compared to Saudi Arabia, for example. How do you?
I agree with you there.
How do you compare